this birth certificate, nowhere is Harry's legal name, and that is the problem.
Now, here's the thing. Harry has been in an odd rut for some time, but this is the most notable. You have undoubtedly heard rumors about some suspicious information on little Diana's birth certificate, but the most recent rumors go deeper than that. There are rumors that Meghan may have committed a full-blown vanishing act, in which Harry's real name is hardly mentioned on his own daughter's birth certificate. And that's not a figure of speech, it's literally not there. Now pause and imagine that your name and legal identification are being removed from one of the most significant records pertaining to your child's life. According to reports, Lilibet's birth certificate lists Harry's legal first and last name, the one that the government actually recognizes, instead of the more unusual choice of the Duke of Sussex as his first name and his Royal Highness as his last. Imagine presenting a passport or other official identification in real life with that combination, and you'd be laughed out of your seat. The office. What's amazing is that this appeared to be deliberate and resembling one person's favorite tool rather than an error made by a sleep-deprived medical clerk. This is where it gets murkier in the UK. Titles like Duke can be used on documents, but legally you still have to include your real name. Meghan's sleight of hand occurred because, while everyone is busy debating royal titles and who should use HR, nobody seemed to notice the deeper game when Harry's identity was removed from a government record. That's not a royal argument, it's legal sleaze. For example, putting a doctor on a form is adorable, but you still need to list John Smith underneath. However, Harry's John Smith equivalent is gone, wiped clean, and the birth certificate was still issued. That's when it dawns on you that this might not have been a simple error, or even a dramatic royal rebellion, but rather a calculated move, because let's face it, Meghan has experience navigating the legal, royal, and Hollywood worlds, and she is familiar with the game and paperwork. Now, here is a small piece of paper that may make it more difficult for Harry to assert his legal rights over his own children. You don't think she knew what she was doing, especially after you find out that birth certificates are the basis for all passports, legal claims, custody disputes, and everything else. Without Harry's correct legal name on them, things start to fall apart quickly, and guess what? That's exactly what happened when Harry attempted to obtain British passports for Archie and Leet. The entire process stalled for months, and when they asked why, they respond to technological problems, technological difficulties. Of course, but Harry was angry and sensed something was wrong. I don't blame him. He even allegedly suggested using the name as a workaround. Spencer responded, "Yep, his mother's maiden name." Consider the desperation of a real prince of the United Kingdom attempting to apply for his children's documents under the name of a family he was never legally a part of. This is the type of thing you do when you've reached a breaking point, and your last name suddenly loses all of its meaning. From where I sit, this isn't just about names. It's about power, legal authority. So, what's actually happening here? Is it simply royal incompetence, or is it something more deliberate? When you peel back the layers of this mess, it's difficult not to wonder how Harry got caught in such a tangled web. This isn't just some bureaucratic hiccup, it's personal. Meghan may have just played a legal game of chess where Harry's identity was the first piece off the board, and the consequences are just beginning to appear. Meghan is playing three-dimensional chess with institutions, while Harry is fumbling around trying to get legal documents for his kids, and let's be honest, she's good at it. She knows exactly which strings to pull and, more importantly, which strings to cut, so Harry is stuck with nothing left to hold on to. And let's not forget about those passport delays. On paper, they're listed as technical issues, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out the connection. You can't just slap a royal title where a legal name should precede and assume that everything will go without a hitch. Verified birth certificates are needed for British passport applications. It is understandable that they had to take extreme measures, issue legal threats, and attempt to escalate the situation through a 24-hour emergency service in order to get the paperwork moving again. If Harry's real name was not on Lilibet's document, however, to make matters worse, Harry allegedly insisted on including their royal titles HRH in addition to standard passports, which was enough to grind the wheels process to a standstill, particularly since the royal family had previously made it apparent that Harry and Meghan shouldn't use those titles for business or public endeavors. However, Harry appears desperate to preserve what little remaining royal identity he has, even if it means dragging his children along with him. He allegedly even threatened to demand all internal data pertaining to the delays. This isn't a guy who is merely irritated, rather, he's someone who understands that something is being concealed and needs invoices, and it dawns on Harry that he may now be understanding that the power he believed he had is no longer there. Meghan isn't merely operating the ship She may have been the one who constructed it in the first place. Next comes the re-registration, which is based on legal sources. You cannot simply ignore the fact that a birth certificate does not include the father's full name. Instead, it must be formally registered, which requires you to produce proof, obtain consent, and essentially repeat one of the most crucial papers in a child's life. So while everyone is debating whether Meghan is using HR on business cards, Harry is frantically trying to ensure that his name is legally associated with his own daughter. The situation becomes even more dire when you consider the larger picture. If Harry ever wanted to travel with the kids, say, to the UK without Meghan, he would need her written consent. That is the law. If Meghan declines, he is stuck as a prince who cannot even board a plane with his kids, unless the woman in charge of the paperwork signs off. And to be honest, does anyone think she would hand over that kind of power so easily? What's most disturbing is how invisible Harry is becoming in all of this, stripped of his entire royal identity and possibly stripped of legal clarity as a parent. Meghan, meanwhile, keeps her cards close and her hands clean, whether on purpose or by accident, sitting in the one position that matters most, holding the key to the kids, the paperwork, and possibly even Harry's remaining connection to the royal world, which he still clings to. Harry may still wear the man who once stood a few feet from the throne, is now circling his own family, watching as legal documents, travel permits, and even the basic right to be a father are entangled in red tape and royal politics. It's not just the monarchy erecting obstacles. It's the life he helped create that is beginning to enclose him. Dig into the specifics, and it's evident that the birth certificate situation was never just about formatting. It was about setting legal precedent, because whether Meghan planned it or not, the result is that Harry's status as a legal parent was obscured, if not completely removed, from a document as important as your child's birth certificate. This is more important than most people realize in situations involving custody disputes or international travel. The lack of a fully confirmed parent on a birth certificate creates legal, consular, and governmental problems. Agencies deal in legal identity, not titles. And if Harry and Meghan ever got into a fight over the kids, God forbid during a divorce or separation, he would start from a weaker position, because paperwork doesn't care who your grandmother was. But it's not just the legal disadvantage, it's also the symbolic eraser. Even though Harry continues to wear a royal title, he is increasingly appearing in the documents that determine fatherhood, travel, and inheritance. A ghost. However, Meghan has established a new power structure that is not connected to Buckingham Palace. It is based on legal control, strategic positioning, and a very calculated understanding of optics. Consider how the media has contributed to this. Reports about the couple's use of royal titles in business dealings, media appearances, and even branding are constantly in the news. But no one seems to be questioning the legal inconsistencies that are slipping through the cracks. How does a birth certificate get processed when the father's true name is missing? The fact that a man like Harry ends up presenting legal threats in order to obtain paperwork for his own children is blatantly distracting. The true power dynamics are quietly shifting behind closed doors. Even worse is what would happen if Meghan chose to further distance herself from Harry. Given current travel regulations, she might prevent him from leaving the country with their children, and since most custody laws, particularly in the US, favor the primary caregiver, she would be forced to fight from a position of weakness every time. Every time he enters a courtroom, passport office, or consulate, the same question will be asked: where is your legal standing? And don't forget about the registration. If that occurred, it indicates that behind the scenes, someone realized something was wrong with the original document and had to go back and correct the oversight. However, by that point, the damage had already been done, the trust had been eroded, and the deeper story had begun to spread. This story isn't about birth certificates or visas. It's about how easily a prince can become a bystander in his own life, and how someone who once stood for royalty now has to struggle to get his name on paper. It's about how power can be used wisely, and that sometimes all you need is a pen, a form, and the insight to know exactly which names not to include.